Welcome back, boys and girls. I hope you all feel a little bit better about simplifying radicals after a little bit more practice with that do now activity. If you don't, the IXL is there to go get a little bit more practice, and anytime you make mistakes in there, they're going to give you explanations of what you need to do to solve that problem correctly. Okay, now we're going to apply some of that stuff to what we call the Pythagorean theorem. We're going to take some notes right here. Okay, pause the video right now and get those notes out. I'm going to keep rolling. Okay, the Pythagorean theorem states that in a right triangle, the sum of the squares of the length of the sides, or the length of the legs, is equal to the square of the length of the hypotenuse. Okay, there's some new language in there for sure. Okay, and when we look over here in the steps section, it kind of explains that the hypotenuse is the side opposite the right angle. Okay, and so then over here, right, we've got a couple little images that show us what we're talking about. I'm going to get this out of here. I'm going to let you see this whole thing. You're looking at the same thing on your desk in front of you, okay? The hypotenuse is the side opposite the right angle. So the right angle's here, the hypotenuse is there, okay? The legs are the sides adjacent to the right angle. Okay, adjacent to means next to each other, sharing a vertex. They're next to each other. Adjacent angles share a vertex and a side. Remember that. Okay, and the hypotenuse of a right triangle is always the longest side. Okay, and the theorem tells us that if A and B are the legs and C is the hypotenuse, then A squared plus B squared equals C squared. C squared is the hypotenuse. That's the letter we use to represent the hypotenuse, and A and B are the two legs. Okay, A and B are here adjacent to the right angle, and C is opposite of the right angle, and it's the longest side, and once again that's called the hypotenuse. Okay, so this is a great resource for you. And we can see there's a nice example over here. It shows us that if we have a triangle inside of these 1, 2, 3 squares, right, a 3 by 3 and a 4 by 4 and a 5 by 5, we have a 3, 4, 5 triangle, and 3 squared equals 9, and 4 squared equals 16, and 5 squared equals 25. And if we add these two together, 9 plus 16 equals 25. So that's a really nice visual aid there. So make sure you remember that that's your resource. Okay, and we go on to the next page. We go to the next page, and what we've got is a couple of examples. Okay, again over here we've got kind of the same thing, the description, the definitions, the hypotenuse. We know that that's opposite of the right angle. So over here in this example, here's my right angle, that little box marks that. And the hypotenuse, or side C, the longest side, is right here. And you can see I've already worked out that that's 25 inches long, because what I did was identified these two sides adjacent to the right angle as the legs. And so those are sides A and B. And what I did was wrote out the equation, right? This is the Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. Okay? And then I filled in the known values. Okay? One leg I identified as A is 7. The other leg I identified as B is 24, and I squared both of those values, right? 7 squared is 49, and 24 squared is 576, and if I add those two together, they're equal to C squared. And from the practice we did yesterday, we're gonna find the square root of 625, because 625 equals C squared. And if I find the square root of C squared, let's see, right? Because c times c equals c squared. And 25 times 25 equals 625. And we can work this all out on our calculators. You guys probably know how to do all this stuff, but just a really quick refresher course. If I go 7 up 2, I'm raising 7 to the second power, 7 squared. That gives me 49. And then I add 24 up 2, and that's going to give me 625. And then I do second, this x squared button, the square root symbol or the radical symbol's right above it, 625. I don't even have to close the parentheses, but it's a good habit. It equals 25. So c equals 25. So this triangle has sides or legs of 7 inches and 24 inches. And if we know that information, and we know this is a right triangle, then we can find that the hypotenuse is 25 inches long. Don't forget to put your units of measure in there. Always important. Okay. Now we've got a second example down here that's a little bit different. And the difference is I'm given the length of the hypotenuse and the length of one of the legs, but not the other leg. Right? Remember, the legs are adjacent to the right angle, and the hypotenuse is opposite of the right angle. So even though we didn't know that this is the longest side, even though we can tell just by looking at it, the side opposite of the right angle is the hypotenuse. So again, I write out my equation, and then I know I identified one of my legs as A, 12 squared. I don't know what B is, but 12 squared plus B squared equals 15 squared. And then I just type all those values in my calculator if I don't know what they are, and I find 12 squared is 144. I still don't know what B is, so I just bring that down. And 15 squared is 225. Okay, now I just have this two-step equation, and we know how to do this. You draw a line right through that equal sign. Anything you do on one side, you do on the other, and you're trying to isolate that variable, that B value. You want to know what one of those is worth. So we subtract 144 from both sides, and we wind up with B squared equals 81. And then if I take the square root of B squared, and I take the square root of 81, I'm doing the same thing on both sides, I find that B equals 9, because 9 times 9 equals 81. And once again, you're just going to go second x squared, or root 81. Don't even have to close the parentheses, it equals 9. Okay, and we know that B squared equals B because, like, 2 squared equals 4, right? And the square root of 4 equals 2. They're just inverse operations. Okay. Alright, we're gonna go on to the next example here. Which again, I've worked these problems out. I'm hopefully getting a little bit better at this for you. And again, we're trying to find the missing side length. Okay, and in this first example here, right, I know my hypotenuse, or side C, is opposite of my right angle. So over here, it's the longest side. I've already found that it's equal to 50, but I didn't know that. Okay, I was given side A and side B, the two sides adjacent to the right angle. So here's my Pythagorean theorem formula again, right? And I'm going to fill in the values that I identified. 30 for A, so 30 squared, plus 40 for B, 40 squared, equals C squared. I don't have that. You just have to remember that's not there. Okay, and then 30 squared is 900, right? And 40 squared is 1,600. That's like 4 squared with a couple more zeros. And when I add those together, that should equal C squared. So you can use your calculator if you need to do that. You guys know how to do that stuff. I don't need to do it for you. If I take the square root of 2,500 and the square root of C squared, I'm going to find that 50 is equal to C. Okay, one more time. Second root 2500. Enter 50. There we go. So I wrote 3, 4, 5 ratio up here because any triangle that has a ratio of 3 to 4 to 5 for sides A, B, and C is a right triangle. We're going to learn about that later. That's the inverse of the Pythagorean theorem. But right now, I put that in there because 3 times 10 is 30, 4 times 10 is 40, and 5 times 10 is 50. Pretty easy to see right there. Alright, so the next example over here, number 5. Right. Once again, we've got C, the long side, the opposite side, the hypotenuse. Make sure you know what that word means. Is 41 inches, and then one of my legs is 40 inches, and the other leg I don't know yet. I'm identifying these as A and B. Okay, my formula: A squared plus B squared equals C squared. Fill in the blanks again. A, I said it was 40, so 40 squared plus B, still an unknown. So 40 squared plus B squared equals 41 squared, and I just put all those values into my calculator. Right? I can do 41 times 41 equals, or I can do 41 up 2 equals, and I get the same answer. I get 1,681, and I do 40 up 2, enter, 1,600. Once again, we're back to that two-step equation where I just subtract 1,600 from each side so I can get the B value all by itself and figure out what it's worth. And B squared equals 81. And if I take the square root of B squared and 81, doing the same thing on both sides all the time, I get B equals 9. So this leg over here is 9 inches long if we know that sides A and C are 40 and 41. Okay, and that is going to be the end of our lecture notes for today, so please set those aside and we'll move on to some classwork. I hope you're all doing